Good evening. In the headlines today, President Reagan led a chorus of anger over release of the ship hijackers. At least 42 El Salvadoran soldiers were killed in a major guerrilla raid, and actors Yul Brynner and Orson Welles died. We will have the details of all the day's major stories in a moment. Robin?
Our first focus is the hijacking aftermath. We discuss who controls the hijackers and what should be done with them. Then the farm crisis. We have a documentary report on the political threat for Republicans in the Farm Belt and a live interview with Agriculture Secretary John Block.
Funding for the MacNeil Lehrer News Hour is provided by AT&T. Whether it's telephones, information systems, long-distance services, or computers, AT&T. Funding also is provided by this station and other public television stations, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
There were angry words from President Reagan today about the cruise ship hijacking. He called on the Palestine Liberation Organization to turn the 4 hijackers over to a sovereign state so they can be prosecuted for murder of passenger Leon Klinghoffer. Klinghoffer, a 69-year-old partially paralyzed man from New York, was reportedly shot and then thrown overboard by the hijackers. President Reagan said first today it would be fine with him if the PLO went ahead with handling the killers themselves, saying, in our country, that would mean capital punishment. Mr. Reagan, on a trip to the Chicago area, revised those remarks to reporters later in the day.
But apparently there's a little confusion, maybe I'm responsible, I don't know, with regard to the PLO and their part in this hostage setup. I did not mean to imply that I favored them giving a trial or attempting to do justice to the hijackers. What I really believe that the PLO, if the hijackers are in their custody, should turn them over to a sovereign state that would have jurisdiction and could prosecute them as the murderers that they are.
There was confusion all day over where the hijackers actually were. One unconfirmed report said they were still in Egypt awaiting transport to Tunisia, where PLO headquarters are located. Others said they were already in Tunisia, free men. The possibility of their being free incensed members of Congress as well as the president. Here's a sampling of what was said on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Yesterday, Egypt let 4 of the terrorists go, and we give them $2.3 billion in aid every year. They knew that these were terrorists, and they let them go. We ought to suspend aid to Egypt until they give us a response.
It is clearly within the power of Yasser Arafat, the PLO, the governments of Egypt, and those of other Arab nations to hunt the 4 terrorists down and to do it quickly and urgently.
It must be made clear to any nation, friend or foe, that allowing these international criminals to escape the administration of justice will result in the end of U.S. foreign assistance to that country.
Those people only understand one thing, and that's force. It's time to take names and kick rear ends.
A fuller description of the killing of Leon Klinghoffer was given today by the Italian ambassador to Egypt, Giovanni Miliuolo, after spending 6 hours talking to the liner's crew and passengers. As quoted by the Italian news agency ANSA, the ambassador gave this account. On Tuesday, the hijackers made all the British and American civilians lie down, among whom was Leon Klinghoffer. The hijackers pushed him onto his wheelchair and dragged him to the side of the ship, where, in cold blood, they shot him in the face. The corpse was then thrown into the sea, along with the wheelchair. No explanation was given for why Klinghoffer was singled out. Today, Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak answered criticism of his country's handling of the 4 hijackers. He told reporters that at the time his government had not heard reports that an American passenger had been murdered.
When we start to take them, we haven't this information. This information appeared 5 hours after we took them. In this period, they left the country.
The hijackers?
Yeah.
So where are the hijackers now?
They left the country. I don't know where did they go.
Tunisia, possibly? Are they in Tunisia?
In Tunisia, maybe in Tunisia.
And what is Egypt's response now, position? Because America apparently was interested in the fact that there was not a death. Now
you should know we started to make some negotiations when we understood that there was no body killed on board of the ship. So we accepted, after the ambassador of Italy and Germany agreed to take the people to save the 400 personnel in the ship, and instead of exploding it, we accepted to take these people and send them out, as they agreed upon that.
Both Mubarak and the PLO questioned whether the elderly American had been murdered. The PLO Foreign Affairs spokesman, Farouk Kaddoumi, asked the United Nations Security Council if there was proof.
I wish to ask, is there an evidence that those hijackers had killed that civilian? Where is that evidence? He is 69 years old, and his family stated that he suffered frequently before from heart attacks. He was also suffering from paralysis. I'm wondering why and how those can attack or kill such an old person. I'm not defending that, but I'm defending logic and reality.
The Israeli envoy to the United Nations, Benjamin Netanyahu, responded later, saying Mr. Klinghoffer had in fact been selected and slain because he was Jewish, and that Israeli intelligence has proof of Yasser Arafat's prior knowledge of the hijacking.
The facts show without a shadow of a doubt that the hijacking of the Italian cruise liner Achille Lauro on October 7th was carried out by the Abu Abbas faction of the PLO's Palestine Liberation Front. It was carried out with the full prior knowledge and approval of the PLO chairman. Mr. Arafat's subsequent protestations that he had nothing to do with this, and his attempt at benevolent, quote, benevolent intermediacy, were simply a cover-up for his own role and for the failure of the mission.
In Israel, Prime Minister Shimon Peres said it was terrible that Egypt had released the hijackers and indicated that Israel reserved the right to avenge the murder of Leon Klinghoffer. Israel's Foreign Ministry Director General David Kimchi told reporters the original plan of the terrorists was to travel aboard the cruise ship to the Israeli port of Ashdod and carry out an attack there. Kimchi said he believed they had changed their minds and seized the ship instead because their identities had been discovered. Our first focus tonight is the growing uproar in the aftermath of the Achille Lauro hijacking. There was both official and unofficial anger in Washington today over the fact that the hijackers would apparently safely leave Egypt. Here's how President Reagan reacted to the incident when asked about it in Chicago today.
Apparently there's a little confusion, and maybe I'm responsible, I don't know, with regard to the PLO and their part in this hostage setup. I did not mean to imply that I favored them giving a trial or attempting to do justice to the hijackers. What I really believe that the PLO, if the hijackers are in their custody, should turn them over to a sovereign state that would have jurisdiction and could prosecute them as the murderers that they are. And that is reality what I think should be done and what we would make every effort to see would be done.
Well, sir, if they won't turn them over, how can we make them turn them over?
That is a problem we'll have to look at and find out. And if I had an answer to that specifically right now, I wouldn't make it public.
Are you satisfied that the PLO does have control of the hijackers in Tunisia now?
I would have to tell you that there had been so many things spoken and left unanswered in this, and then I'm going to go into lunch after I say this, that I'm hesitant about saying anything positive. It was our understanding that they were put in their custody, and where they are now or whether they have them, I don't really know, and I'm just trying to keep in touch with our sources of information, our ambassador there, to try and stay abreast of what the situation is.
Are you satisfied they're out of Egypt, though, sir?
No, I'm not even satisfied with that. All I know is they're off the boat, and they're someplace over there, and our people are safe.
No trial by the PLO.
What?
No trial by the PLO.
No, I don't think that they're not a sovereign nation, and I don't think that they would have a machinery that
Despite what Mubarak... You would not be satisfied, as you said before, you would not be satisfied if they punished you. You said that you would be satisfied, but now you're saying you would not be satisfied.
Well, no, and I shouldn't have made a statement of that kind. I think that I was thinking kind of as mad as I am, vengeance instead of justice. And
but any sovereign nation?
What?
Any sovereign...
Well, I think that there's a possibility of our own because it was our citizen, but Italy because it was an Italian ship. I think because the crime began in Egypt, there could be I think that you could find a reason for more than one sovereign nation to have jurisdiction in this case.
Don't you believe Mubarak when he says that they're out of Egypt? The President Mubarak says they're out of Egypt. Don't you believe him?
It isn't the case. It's whether he has all the same information or the information he should have, too. Earlier, in his work to get the hostages freed, he did not know that a crime had been committed either.
Mr. President, the Israelis say that Yasser Arafat knew in advance of the raid. Is that your understanding, sir?
What?
The Israelis say Yasser Arafat knew in advance of the hijacking.
I wouldn't have any way of knowing whether that's true or not.
They say you were planning a military operation to free the hostages if they had not been freed.
Now, Sam, you know that that's something I can't talk about either.
If the president was mad, so were members of Congress. Some there want the United States to penalize Egypt. One senator who thinks that way is Republican Arlen Specter of Pennsylvania, a member of the Select Committee on Intelligence. What should the United States do to Egypt, Senator?
I think that we ought to withhold $1 billion in aid. We give Egypt something in excess of $2.6 billion now, and on the facts as presented, Egypt had absolutely no business in turning those hijacker pirates free. I saw President Mubarak as he appeared on the earlier part of this show, and I thought he was evasive. It is plain, I think, on these facts that before they carried out the deal to free them, that they knew that a murder had been committed of a United States citizen. And I'm not at all satisfied, even as we talk now, that Egypt does not have the power to recall that airplane and the airplane headed for Tunis and gain custody over the hijackers, and I think they ought to be turned over to the United States for trial. And Egypt is at fault here, and if we're ever to get on with the business of dealing with terrorism, we ought to show them that we really mean business, and $1 billion would show we're serious.
Do you have any further information about what representations this country's making to Mubarak and whether the hijackers are still in Egypt? Or?
I do not know. I do know that when I spoke early this morning on the Senate floor, that an inquiry was made by the Egyptian embassy here in Washington, and I do believe that there was a period of time, and we'll have to find this out for sure, where Egypt could have recalled the plane and could have regained custody of the hijackers and would have been in the position to turn them over to the United States.
Mm-hmm. If they are not turned over to the United States or to Italy or put on trial there, should the United States make some attempt to get them itself?
Well, if we could, short of a military action, I think that we should. There is precedent by the Supreme Court of the United States which says that if we can attain custody of people, we can bring them to the United States. And last year, the Congress enacted legislation which authorizes extraterritorial jurisdiction. That is to say, that those hijacker pirates are subject to trial in the United States District Court here in Washington, just as the terrorists who hijacked the TWA plane are. And I would like to find a way to get them short of warfare. And if we can, we ought to bring them here, try them, convict them, and punish them.
Would you approve a clandestine semi-military operation to grab them like the Israelis grabbed Eichmann?
Yes, I would, providing it was done carefully, providing that it was targeted to the specific individuals, that it did not run a material risk of hitting innocent people, and that it could be done discreetly. That is the substance of a bill which I introduced 18 months ago in the United States Senate.
Mm-hmm. Where does all this leave the PLO, Arafat, and any possible Palestinian role in a peace, furthering the peace process in the Middle East, do you think?
Well, I don't think that Arafat has ever been a serious player in a peace role in the Mideast. There is room under the Camp David Accord, obviously, for a Palestinian delegation, but it is my firm belief that that delegation ought not to consist of anybody from the PLO. Every time you turn around, Arafat is engaging in some new form of double talk. He doesn't recognize the right of Israel to exist. I don't think Israel can be asked to negotiate with the PLO or Arafat, so that as far as I'm concerned, Arafat is a non-player.
Thank you. We'll come back, Senator. A Palestinian view now from Hisham Sharabi, a member of the Palestine National Council, which serves as a parliament in exile. He's a professor of history at Georgetown University. Professor Sharabi, do you, from your contacts, have any information on whether the PLO holds these people or expects to hold them, or what is the situation tonight that you know?
First of all, I would like to make a correction. I'm not a member of the National Council.
I beg your pardon.
No, I have no information beyond the ones that we have heard on the news as to the whereabouts of the terrorists.
Mm-hmm. What do you make of the Israeli charge that their intelligence tells them that Arafat knew in advance of this mission?
I don't take that seriously at all. At every turn, the Israeli authorities, intelligence, government go out of their way without any clear evidence to implicate the PLO directly in acts of terror such as this. There is every indication in this case that the group that undertook this operation belonged to a splinter segment of the national command or the general command that left the PLO in 1982, and that the PLO has apparently no knowledge of it.
As a Palestinian or person of Palestinian origin, what do you think should be done with these hijackers yourself?
You know, every time that such unspeakable events take place in that region, people here and elsewhere talk about force, vengeance, and doing away with terror. Fine, we all agree with that. But there is another dimension to terror, and that is, why is it taking place? Why is this pattern of spiraling terrorism, this unspeakable type of behavior? Some of the hostages have suggested that we should look beyond the act itself, but never in the media, including this, the most serious program in the media of news, has dealt with the background, the environment that produces terror. That is, not only the symptom, but the cause.
Not everybody watches every program, but I think we should say that we have done some of that. Anyway, what do you think should be done with the 4 hijackers? Suppose they're still in Egypt. Suppose the PLO has them. What should be done with them, do you think?
Chairman Arafat was asked yesterday on the news whether he would consider handing them over to Italy. His answer was very positive, indicating that he might. I personally hope that he does.
What do you feel, with your sympathies with the Palestinians, about the conduct of these men, if the account that we gave earlier by the Italian ambassador to Egypt is true, that they cold-bloodedly shot this old man and threw him overboard? What does that make you feel about the cause and the justification for terror?
It makes me feel outrage. It's an unspeakable act. These people do not represent the Palestinian people, and unconditionally condemn such cowardly action. But saying that, I will not continue to describe feelings of outrage, to express condemnation. We must get into a debate in this country about the real reasons for these unspeakable acts in the Middle East, in the Arab world, that has to do directly with American policy, with America's responsibility, with Israel's terroristic acts as well.
How do you feel about that, Senator Specter?
I believe that that is absolutely no justification for what has occurred here. You can't justify the murder of a 69-year-old United States citizen for any other grounds. Israel has been ready to move forward to discuss the issues on the West Bank and the Palestinian problem. Last week, King Hussein was in Washington, and many of us in the United States Senate urged him to take the lead. I have personally urged President Mubarak to join with King Hussein in taking the lead to have those peace discussions go forward. But Hussein will not publicly recognize the right of Israel to exist, will not publicly move away from the state of belligerency which exists between Israel and many of the Arab states. Israel is ready to negotiate, and I think the United States policy in supporting Israel is exactly right.
Mr. Sharabi?
The time has come to break through these myths. Israel refuses to negotiate. Israel's attack on Tunis against the PLO headquarters was designed, in my opinion, primarily to torpedo the peace initiative of King Hussein and Chairman Arafat. For the first time in 30 years, we have a real initiative undertaken by the two leaders that are directly concerned with the Arab-Israeli conflict. PLO Chairman Arafat and King Hussein of Jordan both have gone all the way to say publicly to the world that they're willing to recognize Israel, to live in peace with Israel, and to negotiate with Israel. And Israel has done everything it can to block this initiative.
Senator?
Robin, if I may interject, I don't think that's true at all. Arafat has never said that he's prepared to recognize Israel or the right of Israel to exist. And it is not true that this is the first initiative in 30 years. The real initiative was undertaken by Anwar Sadat of Egypt. And there was an arrangement for peace in the Camp David Accord. And Israel made very substantial concessions in real estate and had recognition from Egypt.
Let's have one final comment from Professor Sharabi on this question and then come back to the ship for a moment. Professor Sharabi?
This is the first time the Palestinians officially commit themselves to a peace settlement with Israel. Israel is refusing to do that. Israel wants to keep the territory it annexed by force of arms that belong to the Palestinians.
Professor Sharabi, let me ask you this. Finally, we have a minute. Senator says the United States would be justified in seizing these hijackers and bringing them back here for trial. What is your feeling about that?
I'm against that. I think that would be engaging in the kind of terrorism that President Reagan mentioned a few weeks ago. I don't think that's the way that a superpower should act.
Robin, if you have a minute, there's a case where Illinois went to Peru.
Less than a minute, Senator.
Less. Got a man named Kerr, brought him back, kidnapped him from Peru, brought him back to Illinois and tried him. And the United States Supreme Court said it was appropriate.
I see. Well, thank you both for joining us, Senator Specter, Professor Sharabi. Thank you both for joining us this evening. Jim?